Hello, and welcome back to another pen talk. Whoop. As you can see, a metal pen on the metal Scorpion is not a good combo. It's slippery, the balance is not right. So much for that. Hello, and welcome back to another pen talk. Thank you very much for joining me as I explore this incredible, amazing wide world of pens that we are very fortunate to enjoy. And here you see, rotating in front of you, an interesting vintage pen. This is in the restored condition, and we're going to take you through the various steps that I do in my restoration. This one was interesting in many ways. And it is a combo. Yes, one end is a pencil, the other is a fountain pen. I kind of have a soft spot for this design, and it was very popular for a while, maybe back in the 20s, 30s, and then by the 40s I'm pretty certain it had pretty much died out. So sit back, grab a beverage, and enjoy the show. Yes, the restored pen, I'm pretty certain it's a gold-filled material. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The cap comes off in just a very brief turn. I mean, it's a functional working writing instrument, but I'm not happy with that gap there. I'm not happy with a few of the things. It could be just the nature of this design and the challenges in putting it into working order, but I'm happy with it. It feels good in the hand. You know, that's why humans enjoy gold, because it just feels nice. So we're going to explore, as I mentioned, my restoration of this writing instrument. To me, the first step in restoring a vintage pen is disassembly, and this pen came apart relatively easily. I showed you what it looks like when it's totally restored, so this is what it looks like before I restored it. It was in good shape. Yeah, the clip's a little crooked. Yeah, but I'm certain it will clean up well and become a good writing instrument soon. So the other thing that's good about it is the lever works really well. The pressure bar is in good shape. And yes, there's some initials, but that just means somebody loved this pen in its past. Here we can see how that pressure bar works well. Lever looks like it has little feet on it, kind of like a Waterman would. Oh, you may be able to see, I polished up the cap, and it took more effort than I expected. I used my trusty polishing pads, but I wasn't happy with how it was taken off the tarnish. So I went to the next level with semi-chrome. As you can see, it took off a lot of tarnish. One of the things that I'm surprised about is there's no markings on what this pen is made out of. I'm assuming it's some type of rolled gold. So here's an example of a Parker cap from later on. I don't know whether the color is something you can discern. My eyes are not good enough to be able to discern the difference in colors. This cap may be a little bit more yellow. This may be a little bit more gold, if that is a color. But if we look at the bottom of the Parker cap, we'll see it's marked as rolled gold. We'll see if the camera's picking that up. I did some research to see when did they start marking rolled gold or gold filled. So here's an interesting pen. I'd say it's from 1914. This is similar color to what we had on that combo that I'm refurbishing, but there's no markings on this either. And I'm certain there's some type of gold. Don't know how it's done. It's not gold plate. Some kind of mechanically adhered surface of gold or some type of gold. It could be, 10 karat, 12, 14, who knows. So you may ask, what else is interesting about this 1914 pen? Well, if we look at the back of the barrel, we'll see it was a bank pen given away by the bank in Southbridge, Massachusetts. Good question. One can only wonder. Last look. Here's a Waterman clip. It's a 14 karat clip. No markings on the rest of the pen, so I'm assuming this is more of a gold filled, similar color. I mean, it certainly has survived its test of time, considering how old it is. You know, probably from 1915 to 1920 is my guess. No markings on the end of the barrel. If we take off the cap, we'll see an interesting small nib. Looks like it's smaller than it should be, but yeah, it fits the feed well. And who knows what they made and put together almost over a century ago. So you may ask, what's your most interesting combo? And I would have to put this one up there. Yes, I have not polished it at all, as received condition, but we wonder who made it. And if we look at the bottom of the barrel, we'll see it was made by Tiffany. Interesting. Who would have guessed that they would have made a sterling silver combo? Yes, there's a fountain pen, and yes, this needs a lot of work to get it in working order. No, I haven't put the time in yet. So here's another older Waterman, a Franken pen. Sterling silver overlay here on the cap and some type of gold filled. And again, it's not marked at all. They did put initials in a lot of pens back then. And no identification at the bottom of the barrel. Cap comes off in a very short amount of turns. And we'll just see a standard Waterman Ideal nib. I enjoy this pen. I enjoy the Frankenization. It's another example of an old pen. It had some enamel decoration on it. It's made in USA. And it's identified at the bottom of the cap as a Schaefer. And if we open it up, we'll see your standard Schaefer gold nib. Interesting heart breather hole there. Again, another pen that could be restored, but I don't know about the enamel overcoat, whether it should stay or not stay, or so many different things. But you can see how the cap covered this, and this did not oxidize. You can see the color difference between those two pieces. So you may ask, is that Tiffany combo the only Tiffany pen you have? And I'd say no. In my career, I worked for a company that owned Tiffany, and I got this as some type of recognition gift or whatever, and also sterling silver, which is nice, and as we see, engraved with my initials. So nice. That clip is not too functional, but it's sterling, and it's Tiffany. You know, one's a pencil, one's a ballpoint. They're nice, and they will stay in the unrestored condition. Those of you that might have said, I would polish up those two Tiffany pen and pencil set that you have, and so I did. And as expected, they cleaned up very, very well. And of course, I put a little bit of Renaissance wax on afterwards. It should minimize tarnishing in the future. They probably sat in a drawer for well over 30 years. So we should get another 30 years out of them. Sterling feels so nice. Yes, I have cotton gloves on because I use that when I'm cleaning pens to keep fingerprints and oil from my hands off the pens while I'm cleaning them. Oof. A viewer suggested the cotton gloves. So now we're ready to put in a new sack. I've cleaned off the end of this section. That old calcified latex sack was there, probably from the original pen. So how do I pick a sack? Well, I pretty much go by feel. I look at that opening, and this is a number 16 sack, and I have various sizes, so it's easy for me to just try them, and I want them to slide in easily with just a slight bit of resistance. So that's good. We have to trim this to size, so we'll mark it off, and we'll trim it just a little bit above there because you want to give it a little bit of slack. Here's the sack attached to the section, and yes, I use a little bit of white wood glue, and I'm going to leave this set for 24 hours, and then I'll put a little shellac at the very end there, not to get any on the section because it's a tight fit now into the barrel the way it is. So restoring pens is at least a 2-day job in the process that I do. So if we're ready for a final assembly, I'm happy with how the pen cleaned up. I find that most of the vintage pens can clean up pretty well, but it's always good that they show a little bit of their age, since this one is probably close to 100 years old. I'm going to put a little bit of shellac down at the bottom of the sack. As you can see, I have pen sack cement, but I don't use shellac between the sack and the section. For the main reason is that it hardens and it makes replacing the sack much more difficult. Many vintage pens were put together that way, and it takes a lot of scraping to get it clean when you want to put a new sack on. I also am very happy with how the nib came out. Yes, it's a Schaefer nib. I'm assuming it's a replacement nib to whatever was on the pen the day it was made, but you've seen how it writes, so let's go to it. And of course, your classic ebonite feed. Very simple channel. You notice the fins don't connect to the channel. It's pretty much similar to what we have on the Waterman as far as how that's carved to carry ink to the nib. We will do a final assembly and wrap it up. So that's how I use the shellac. I find it gives a little bit more extra life to the sack, because I've had sacks come off over use. You never know. But one of the things with vintage pens with sacks is if you're going to use it for many years, you're probably going to have to replace the sack at some point in time. And yes, some people tout silicone sacks, those clear sacks which were primarily used for aromatic fillers, but I find those sacks are not as pliable as these latex sacks, and I just don't use them that much. But this will hold maybe half a mil, maybe a little bit more, but it's enough to do some writing. So this is a great example of not every vintage nib is going to be a wet noodle or very flexy. This nib is very stiff, which is somewhat typical of a lot of vintage Schaefer nibs. And it's also a fairly dry writer. This wet pen Blackberry ink, I'd say, is medium wet. And as you can see, it lays down a decent line. I like the ink color with going with the pen, but it's not going to become an everyday writer for me. I'll probably clean it out and put it in a drawer for future use. So we reached the conclusion of this restoration video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, learned a little bit, at least got to see a lot of some of the other pens that I have in my vintage collection. I just kind of like the simplistic design. I don't see any, indications of who could have made the pen. The cap comes off in just a very brief turn. I'm not exactly pleased with how this came together. I think that nib should be seated a little bit deeper, but that would require a lot more effort and energy than I'm willing to do right now. As you can see, it fits fine in the hand lengthwise, and that section actually can work, but it is on the small side. And the pencil does work. It extends the lead and retreats it. So you always have that end, if you need it, to write with. So with that, we're going to close up the video. I hope everybody is safe, healthy, and happy and enjoying their pens and thinking about vintage. It's always good. Maybe adding some to your writing experiences. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching. We've reached the end of this video, and we will say bye.